meet my bride. Let's go for a ride in my newfangled automobile. Just where we will go, nobody knows, but it's sure a great way to feel. Behind the wheel of the Speed Meter Steel, it's my newfangled automobile.
Hello and welcome to Vintage Car History. I'm Wild Bill. Some 25 years ago, I worked for a company that manufactured parts for big rigs and such. My job was to sell those parts to various manufacturers of big rigs, as well as to large trucking fleets. I got to know some interesting people in this job, and one fellow sticks out. He founded and owned a large trucking fleet of over 400 tractors and trailers traveling all across North America, yet he himself had never driven and did not know how to drive an 18-wheeler. That would be like a car manufacturer who never learned how to drive a car. So let's talk about that car manufacturer, Edwin Thomas. Edwin Ross Thomas was born in Webster, Pennsylvania in 1850. His father, Joseph, owned a shipping company that specialized in transporting coal with river and coastal barges. Thus, young Edwin grew up surrounded by the tools of the transportation trade, and he had a natural knack for business. His wealthy parents sent him to Evansville, Indiana to complete his primary school, and then to Duff's College in Pittsburgh to get his business degree. Yet as early as 9 years of age, Master Thomas was doing business, brokering shipping space on various vessels to the highest bidder. Edwin used the money he earned doing transport brokering to purchase a steamboat at the ripe age of 13. He hired a captain, and while Edwin was in school doing his classwork, his steamboat was on the Ohio or Mississippi River, moving cargoes he brokered and making him even more money. By 1870, he had finished his schooling, owned a fleet of boats moving all kinds of goods across the major rivers of the U.S., and had more money than he could spend. Unsurprisingly, being in the transport business, Edwin loved to travel and would indulge in expeditions across the nation and the world for the rest of his life. He sold his company in 1879 and worked with his father in the coal industry for a few years before turning his attention to railroads as well as back to steamboats. He developed both new rail companies and steamboat lines for the next decade and a half, as well as expanded into new ventures. By 1895, he had brokered the real estate that led to the expansion of Memphis, Tennessee. He was a director of the Mechanic Savings Bank. He owned the East End Railway and was owner of the Thomas Steamboat Line. And it was in this year, 1895, that Thomas got into the personal transportation business. He took over as managing partner of the H.J. Lozier and Company, specifically to run their plant in Toronto, Canada. This plant produced the Cleveland brand of bicycles and were very popular at the turn of the 20th century. Under Edwin's direction, they took their motto, "The best bicycle that money and brains can buy," quite seriously. The Cleveland quickly gained respect in the cycling world for its racing success, durability, lightness, and quality of construction. Indeed, by 1899, Edwin's reputation was such that he was offered and accepted, for a brief amount of time, the vice presidency of the Canada Cycle and Motor Company. But by this time, cars were appearing on the road, and he wanted some of that action. It was late in 1899 that Edwin resigned from both H.A. Lozier and Canada Cycle, left Canada, and settled in Buffalo, New York. He purchased the local remains of a defunct Globe Cycle Company and restarted cycle production under his name, the Thomas Company. At the same time, he began to make his own engines and produce motorcycles. And of course, cars would soon follow. The first Thomas cars were produced in 1902. Small, single-cylinder 8-horsepower cars the first year, followed by 2-cylinder cars of some 12 horsepower the next year. Edwin increased the cylinders to 3, horsepower to 20, and began to refer to his cars as Flyers in 1904. Largely designed by Edwin himself, Thomas Flyers were top of the line, designed and built to compete with the coach-built cars of the day. They were durable yet precise, large yet elegant, and often painted in bright colors. Equipped with a 2-speed planetary transmission and final drive-through chains, the Flyer could handle the American roads, or lack thereof, and look good doing it. And Edwin went to significant lengths to prove just how well made his cars were. In 1908, that length proved to be over 20,000 miles. A Thomas Flyer was at the starting line at the 1908 New York to Paris race, the longest car race ever undertaken in history. And about 5.5 months later, it finished in first place. Needless to say, this victory was celebrated across the world. Songs were written about it, movies were made about it, and the Thomas Flyer was suddenly a very sought-after car. Sales of the Flyers skyrocketed, and the Thomas was poised for a great future. Edwin retired in 1911 on the occasion of his 60th birthday and spent the rest of his life traveling the world with his family and engaging in whatever philanthropical interests suited his fancy. Unfortunately, after his retirement, the design of the Thomas Flyer was changed from chain to shaft drive, and the new shaft drive cars didn't work. The shafts would fly apart at speed, and unfortunately, the company was pretty much defunct a year later. Yet the legend of the Thomas Flyer lives on in the hearts of many. For although Edwin Ross Thomas did not know how to drive a car, he did inspire Professor Fate to often shout, "Push the button, Max!" Thanks for watching Vintage Car History, and we'll see you next week. Peace.